Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Roya Allegra, and first I want to thank you so much for clicking on my video and being present with me in my stories and what I share on here. This is a channel where I share the journey to empowerment, things about spirituality, and other topics of discussion too. Today my video is going to be about my journey to soulful sobriety. Soulful sobriety to me means you carving your own way of experiencing sobriety, achieving sobriety in a way that works for you. There are so many institutionalized ways to get on the path of sobriety, all in which I was in for over 10 years, in and out of these group therapies, rehabs, and Alcoholics Anonymous. So this is going to be a two-part video because it is a really long story of how I have now arrived to being almost 3.5 years sober. And this is my story of how I got to this place. Starting from the very beginning of when I was introduced to substances, I was really following the path of what many California people do at that age. But because I was introduced to this group called Alcoholics Anonymous very young, even before I had ever started really drinking, I think I had ended up knowing a friend of a friend and had started going to the holiday parties there. So I was somehow like introduced to what an alcoholic or addict was far before I had really ever experienced any struggles with substances myself. So this is a very important note to take in, because I just didn't know that, like, this was what I was exposed to, essentially. And as I went through my turmoil of being a teenager, it was definitely not the standard American experience. I was moved out and on my own by the time I was 15. I was working multiple jobs, supporting myself, paying my own bills, and actually going to what is called charter school. So you're not actually in classes. You do the self-study of schooling on your own time, in order for me to work jobs. All while having deep rooted mental health struggles. So what is a girl to do in this situation where she is trying to stay afloat, acting as if she's an adult and really not having an easy way to manage her mental illnesses? And so for me, drinking and partying was my way of escaping and feeling even a bit of normalcy in my ultimately very chaotic childhood and teenage formative years. I don't really think that I was old enough to truly be calling myself an addict or an alcoholic though. But as I had already known about this community, I assumed because I was drinking at this age, I must be one. And so I started going into the program. And I quickly met my first sponsor. This is who I actually ended up moving in with when I needed a place to go to after departing my family's home. Looking back at the age I'm at now, I think to some of the conversations I had with that couple, as they were both really deep, like 10 years deep into this program, they were not the most appropriate conversations. So all in all, my experience as a young teenage girl was really inappropriate all around. I was exposed to criminals and dangerous men that I would have never been sitting in those rooms with to begin with. Granted, there are very kind, enlightened, soft-spoken beings there. I'm not diminishing this. However, being a minor in rooms with older men is just simply something that should not happen, especially because oftentimes these men in those rooms think that just because they're sober that they are like the end all be all of maturity and spirituality and enlightenment, and they feel that they have this like power within them that simply is not there. It's just like they got sober, but they did not actually clean up the acts of the character struggle that they were experiencing. So hearing things like, I can't wait till you turn 18, or we're just waiting till you turn 18, was something very normal for me. And because I was a young girl on her own, even in the workforce, I was often used to hearing these things. So actually, just because I heard it in these rooms, I never realized that this wasn't something that was normal. However, there was some truly blessed experiences that I had because of the conversations with the sponsor that I had at the time that I was living with, and it was specifically about being introduced to the Spirit of God, because I think this is one of the first steps. And I remember the exact moment where she asked me what my higher power was, and this was before I knew anything about spirituality, but I just knew that my higher power was found in nature. And I remember the wind blowing against me in that moment. It was nighttime and I just heard the leaves rustling in the trees, and it was my ultimate confirmation that I find God in the clouds, in the sky, in the birds chirping, and the land. And so that was a very prominent moment for me, absolutely. As I go through the cycles of going in and out of these rooms, there was a really high stake of shame surrounding relapse. But actually, if you Google it, I think it says over half of people that get sober, a really high percentage of people that get sober do end up relapsing. But in the sphere of Alcoholics Anonymous, it was just the worst thing that you could do. It was detrimental. And I acknowledge that some people, their relapse will cost them their life, but I don't believe that I was one of those people. Granted, I'm not saying I wasn't abusing substances. I just know that I wasn't doing anything hard enough to have to ignite and instill that level of fear within me. So, but because I was so young and impressionable, I was convinced that, oh, well, if I relapse and speed, I am going to ultimately spiral and be the most chaotic version of myself. Because in those rooms, this is what I was told. I was told that the longer you stay sober, the stronger your addiction is going to pull you down if you ever relapse again. They would say your addiction is doing push-ups the longer you stay sober. And so I took this so to heart. I'm already a very extreme kind of person. So I was like, oh, I smoked now, so now I'm gonna go be crazy. I believe that I only practiced that level of chaos because I was told that that's what was gonna happen. And I genuinely believe that I probably would have turned out differently if I didn't have these fear-mongering ideologies instilled within me. So I basically had this push-pull experience for almost 10 years. I would get to like a year and a half of sobriety, 6 months here, a year here, lot of time built up for someone who was so young and dealing with, again, so much trauma, essentially. Like, I had so much baggage that the only times I felt like a normal teenager, like I didn't have to grow up so fast, was when I was partying, when I was around the people, smoking on the beach, just like having some beers with friends. Like, granted, I know I was super young, but like, honestly, my perspective, this was the California lifestyle. The thing about me and my past is that I actually became more destructive once I got sober. And that's like hard for some people to conceptualize, but I think this is where my biggest gap of relation with the people sitting in those rooms where was because I was hearing how tumultuous and insane their tactics were when they were using and abusing and getting in car wrecks and all of these things, and I just simply didn't relate to that. I had fun. Like, I'm not gonna say like every experience I had was fun, and I definitely was put in a lot of dangerous situations, but I think because my life in itself was dangerous beyond substances, like there were times where after I relapsed in that couple's house, I got kicked out onto the street. So I didn't really have like a stable source of family connection, or if I did, like their house was so far from my jobs, like I had no idea how I was going to get to work. And like also the trauma within me didn't feel even worthy to accept being there. Like I just felt so ashamed of myself that it was like I don't even feel like I can be seen by my own relatives. And I wish that like anyone could have like seen that within me at that age and like tried to pull me closer, but everyone just kind of brushed me off to the side for the most part. And so I ended up homeless as a teenager, which was dangerous, right? Like, it didn't matter whether substances were involved or not involved. I was in a dangerous position. Like, yeah, I definitely was working, but I also was raised in one of the most expensive cities. And beyond the money of it all, it's like I had such intense demons at this point that stability, like, this isn't, I was on a mission to find whatever I was looking for, and even if it meant destroying myself in the process, because I would have done anything to escape the feelings of suffering I was experiencing from all the trauma. And it was so much happening that it compiled onto the next of just living this life of danger and chaos. And but my connection to spirit and my connection to God was being practiced. I started journaling when I was 15 years old, connecting to my consciousness. I've written, I don't even know, maybe 15 to 20 journals since that age. And even through all the mess of it all, I just knew there had to be a bigger, deeper purpose. Even when I was in the thick of this heartache and post-traumatic stress. This is Lemongrass. She is so adorable and we love her. She doesn't like being picked up. Even when I was in the thick of this like pain and suffering, I always knew there was a greater purpose, and this is genuinely what would drive me to keep going, because the most insane things would happen to me that would take people out for who knows how long, and all I could say to myself is like, yeah, it's because I'm supposed to share this story one day. Like, I knew at a very young age that there's just no way, like, there's no way someone was gonna handle this much if it wasn't to help guide others out of their own turmoil in some way. And I remember being very young, always finding creators on YouTube, searching for someone who had a similar background to me, someone who had a similar story. I needed physical proof that I was going to know that I was going to be okay. I never really found anyone like that closely related to my story, but I still would find glimmers of hope just listening to people on YouTube. And going back a little bit to the rooms, the good parts of the rooms, I would start bringing my journal. I would start bringing my journal to the meetings, which you apparently every time you started over, it was like encouraged to go to a meeting a day for like 90 days. So I would constantly be in meetings, sometimes 2 to 3 times a day, which is crazy, but I would. And oftentimes they were essentially, the way the meeting is structured is they have a main speaker going through maybe an excerpt of the book, the big book, the Alcoholics Anonymous book, and then everyone shares some kind of past experience and how they've grown from it. But oftentimes people wouldn't really talk about their growth. For me, it felt like a lot of dwelling and a lot of sharing in a darker way. So hearing this every day, it definitely gets to you. So I did bring a journal because I was like, all right, I'm gonna start to extract the beauty out of this. If I'm in here and it's supposed to make me better and I'm supposed to like learn something from this community, I'm gonna start writing down the quotes of like what is held true to my heart. And out of the 10 years, I only remember only one quote ever stuck to me, and that is, I don't want the light at the end of the tunnel. I want the full spectrum kaleidoscopic sky. And to me, this was so beautiful and powerful because it was like, I didn't just want like sobriety. I wanted a full, rich life full of friends and magic and beauty and travel and adventure. Like, I didn't just want this like speck of like what it felt like just going in and out of the room, in and out, in and out. Like, I wanted to really live. And brings me to another woman who was my sponsor that I ended up letting go of at the time because she didn't follow suit with the cult-like program. She was kind of off just doing her own thing. She wasn't strictly telling me to call her every day. And because of this, I thought I wasn't going to be supported properly. But actually, I had many beautiful conversations with this woman, and one of them truly changed my life for the trajectory of the rest of existence. I was either 18 or 19 years old at this point, and again, still struggling with my trauma and feeling really defeated because I was also in so many other programs to get help that just like simply weren't helping me. Like, I was in so much therapy, group therapy, like all these different things, and I still like didn't find my way yet. And I felt just disempowered, like connecting to my diagnoses. Like, I'm like, is this just what it is? Like, I just grew up and now I have to like potentially take this medicine and go to these therapists. Like, it was just so many years of trying to feel better and I wasn't quite there yet. So she told me that in other cultures, in other native traditions or more indigenous people, the way they viewed mental illness wasn't necessarily a negative thing. She told me that maybe my sensitivity isn't to be viewed negatively. Maybe the way I feel depressed is because I'm connecting to the collective consciousness of Earth. Maybe my anxiety comes from me picking up on energies that maybe I just am not aware of. And this really just opened my mind because I just always knew that there was more than what I was being told in all of these therapy sessions and group therapies and rehabilitation groups. And like, I knew that my trauma was more than what people were actually portraying to me. So this conversation was so beautiful, and somehow I still let the little fairy go, and I was like, no, I chose another sponsor. And the very last sponsor, she was such a gorgeous, beautiful woman too, and yet I don't think she was very beneficial to my life and my story. All I remember was that I wanted to start taking CBD so badly because I was at these points of PTSD where I would just wake up and like be convulsing, like shaking, because this is just how I lived my life, and I didn't really want to experiment with my brain chemistry even further by taking all these different pills. I was like really wanting to take CBD, and everybody shunned me for it. Like, this was psychoactive, even though it's not. But it was just like looked at so poorly, and these were my guides in life at that time. Like, I was only 19 still, like barely an adult, and I really didn't have guidance growing up. So yeah, I will finish off the story there. Thank you so much for listening. I really, truly, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate experiencing this reflection with me, and I would love to hear your experiences, your journey into a more soulful sobriety. Anything that came up for you, I would so love to hear it. Again, my name is Roya Allegra. If you enjoy my content, please do subscribe. I have so much more to share with you guys, and I am sending you so much love. Mwah.